Shruti, is everything okay now? Is everything okay? I think we suddenly went off. Yeah, welcome to you to all the participants, and I hope you can hear me now. Am I audible? Purvi can just mention it in the chat box so that I'll know. And sorry for the glitches from the backend team. Welcome to the collaborative activity that is CENTA and BSSCA has joined hands together to bring in this lovely webinar series to wonderful participants who are eager to learn, I think, for livelihood. I must mention that because that stands correct with NEP 2020 policy. A quick silent prayer, and then we can go ahead with the program. I wish all of you to join me for the prayer. Deepam Jyoti Parabrahma, Deepam Jyoti Janardanaha, Deepo Harati Papani, Sandhya Deepam Namostute. So welcome once again, my dear participants, on a Tuesday evening for this webinar series. CENTA, as you all know, is Center for Teacher Accreditation, which is a registered certification trademark in India, catering to the entire professional life of a teacher. A certification, career growth, professional development, and helping organizations to recruit, support, and grow their teachers towards high quality education. Center currently serves over 6 lakh teachers and 12,000 institutional leaders, promoters from across 6,000 plus cities, towns, villages across India, and also 40,000 teachers from other countries such as UAE, Philippines, Nigeria, etc. So that is about Center. And Center is now closely working with CBSE as well. And that's the main reason why Bangalore Sahodaya has opted to have this collaborative activity to reach out to numbers. And recently, I was also a part of that particular activity where quality training part of it was done beautifully. And I have started incorporating as a resource person even in my sessions. So thanks to Center and wonderful, lovely resource people who've joined me here. Let me take the opportunity to introduce Upasna, who is the lead for assessment and certification team at CENTA. She holds a bachelor's degree in biotechnology from Bangalore University. She has worked in an MNC for 8 years before transitioning to education, where she taught in various places like Bengaluru, Pune, and New York. She has also done the Teach for India Fellowship and was working as a curriculum designer before joining CENTA. A hearty welcome from all the participants as well as from my side to this platform, Upasna.
Thank you, ma'am.
And we have one more young lady, Shruti, who is also a resource person, who is the lead for learning products team at CENTA. She holds a bachelor's degree in information science from Vishwesvaraya University. She has worked as a software developer in an MNC for 2 years before transitioning to education, where she taught primary grades in a low income school as a part of a Teach for India fellowship. A hearty welcome to you, dear Shruti. So
Thank
we
you,
welcome
ma'am.
you. And of course, we have lovely participants who are eagerly waiting to hear from both the resource people. So I welcome all the participants who have joined. I know you are juggling between a lot of things during the daytime, but still finding this valuable time to be spent. And I'm sure you'll have wonderful takeaways, and your time spent is thoroughly valuable. Over to you, resource people. And a happy learning to all my participants.
Thank you, ma'am, and welcome to everyone. We'll quickly share our screen for today's webinar. And we hope that each one of you is able to take away a number of things from this webinar and is able to apply it in your day-to-day classrooms. The way we want to start this is we will show you a series of slides, and for some time, what we want for you to do is read the slides carefully as they come up on your screen. Okay, so we're sharing the screen with you right now. We hope that you are able to see it. So the first slide is going to come up. Okay. All right. We hope that you were able to read the content on the slides. Now, before we proceed, what we want to do is engage all of you in a quick activity. And for that, what we request you to do is on your device, go to this website called www.menti.com. It's displayed on the screen. We're also going to put the link in the chat box. And this should be on a different tab on your device. So if you're using a mobile phone, you can use a different browser. If you're using a laptop, you can do this on your phone. As you go to www.menti.com, you will be asked to enter a passcode, which is 921210009. It's also a ticker displayed on the screen right now. As you go as you go on to a Mentimeter, you'll be able to see a question over there, which is how many of the 5 slides were you able to read and understand fully? Right, so we've already started seeing responses from the participants. The question is, how many of the 5 slides were you able to read and understand fully? Please use the Menti meter the website to record your responses. Again, go on to www.menti.com and enter the passcode 921210009. We'll wait for a few more seconds to get more responses. We only see like 4 people who have responded, so we're waiting for a few more responses, and then we will share our screen just to show how the responses look. So the 5 slides that we showed to you, out of those 5 slides, how many of those were you able to read and understand fully? Okay, so we don't have a lot of response, but we'll, in the interest of time, we will show you the response in the way it looks. It's a just a side note. It's a very handy tool for everyone to be able to use it in their classrooms. So right now we have about 10 responses that have come in. And as you can see on your screen, it's a beautiful pie chart representing all your responses. Majority of you, in fact, it's equally split between one slide and 3 slides. So several of you were able to read only one slide, whereas several of you were also able to read 3 slides. And then it's a very few of you were able to read all and understand all 5 slides. So great. So now that we understand, we've gone through this activity, let's move on. And we'll just wait for Shruti to share her screen for the next bit. All right. So as you have, gone through this first set of activity, what I want to do is welcome Shruti to take us through what this activity meant and basically lay out the agenda. So Shruti, over to you.
Hello, everyone. Very nice to see so many of you join us today on a Tuesday evening. And we hope you find this workshop very useful. As you can see, we started it a bit different than how we would normally start our workshops, but we will discuss what the intention behind this was. Welcome to the BSSCA CENTA webinar series for teachers and school leaders. We are currently in our third workshop, which is on reading comprehension concepts and how to build those skills. So in this workshop, we will look at what is reading comprehension, what are some aspects of reading comprehension, what does the progression look like, and how to actually build those skills in our students, right? And we hope you leave the session with a good takeaway on how to actually do this in a day-to-day basis in your classrooms. So before we move into the session, I just quickly wanted to discuss about CENTA for those of you who have joined us for the first time. CENTA stands for Center for Teacher Accreditation, and we are an organization that supports the teacher's entire career cycle. So we do this using a combination of CENTA standards, which is our teacher competency framework, and our tech-enabled support platform or portal called MyCENTA, which has a community of around 6,000 plus teachers. Like you can see on the screen, we work with 6,000 plus teachers in 90,000 plus schools in 6,000 plus locations, also outside India, in UAE, UK, Nigeria, Philippines, etc. And CENTA is a registered certification trademark as well. So let's see how CENTA actually supports the teacher's career cycle. So we do this in a threefold manner. Firstly, certification for teachers. So we have our CENTA teaching quotient, CENTA micro credential, our Olympiad exam that happens annually. All of this together helps in certifying and assessing teachers, which gives them a picture of where they currently stand in terms of their own competencies. Then we also have personalized training and self-paced training that we do for teachers using both a combination of paid and free professional development resources and trainings. So we also tie up with universities and have postgraduate programs, etc., and also accredit programs. Since we are a registered certification trademark, we can accredit training programs and feature them in our portals for teachers to purchase. And what else do we do? CENTA also supports the career development for teachers. The end goal via a certification and training is to actually help in career progression for teachers so that organizations identify, retain, and grow great teachers based on CENTA's teaching quotient scores. So this is in a nutshell what CENTA does. So as you can see, we want to focus on a teacher's career from end to end, and therefore here we are trying in another session with all of you to help you build um, skills in reading comprehension. So that brings me to the agenda of today's workshop. So this will be threefold. Right now we will look at section one, but we will be having three sections, just like every other workshop of ours, we have had 3 or 4 sections. In section one, we will focus on what is the meaning of reading levels and a bit of overview of reading levels. In section two and three, which are grayed out, we will talk about main reading comprehension skills. What are some approaches to building these skills in students? And we will do all of this using a set of practice questions. So again, we'll be using Mentimeter for that. So we hope you have kept your Mentimeter window handy. This is very similar to how we have done every workshop until now. And in the third section, again, we'll be sharing a very effective takeaway with you that you can print and directly use in your classrooms, along with some additional resources, and we'll share the link for the feedback. So let's begin, right? So section one is overview of reading levels. Okay, so now we are going back to the 5 passages that Upasana asked all of you to go through. And in the Mentimeter, we also asked you a question, right? How many of the 5 passages were you able to fully read and understand? So now I quickly want to see in the chat box, I want all of you to share what was different about each of the 5 passages you read. So you read 5 passages. In a nutshell, what do you think was different about all of them? So we'll quickly come back to the chat box to see what all of you are sharing. So I want you all to share what was different about each of the 5 passages that you read. Great. I see Moshina ma'am say length of the passages. Excellent point. Anyone else? Anything else? Yes, ma'am. Length of the passages, a very, very good point. What else? Anyone else? Length, okay. Any other point? What else was different? Length means, okay, the length of the passage, number of words used, fine. What else? Looking for 1 or 2 more. Okay. More content. Manjula ma'am says more content. Simi ma'am says description. And Sudeepa ma'am says she saw figures in some of them. I think pictures you mean, and in some they were not there. Rose ma'am says first view, I think you're referring to were easy to skim through. Poonam ma'am says, I think you mean the later slides, you could not read it very quickly. Great. Okay, so Simi ma'am says that how much we described. Command over the language. Okay, I see a lot of beautiful points. Let's quickly come back and see what was different, right, in each of them. So parameters of reading levels of the text, right? Print size, basically length of the passage, words on a page. Print size was different. Visual representation. You saw the first few had images and text, and images were placed in a certain place, and then you had text. Next few had only text in it, right? So the way it was visually represented, the vocabulary that was used. I was hoping for some of you to tell me if you got a chance to read it, that the vocabulary was different. The first few slides had very simple, easy vocabulary, and as we progressed, it got a bit more complicated or a bit more advanced. Frequency of the text repeating, right? Sentence length and structure, which many of you had mentioned. Familiar versus new concepts topics. In some cases, it was very familiar what was happening, but then in the later text, we were also talking about new things, like information that you didn't know, like 51% increase in the 51% of teachers are accessing learning resources, 1,000 plus teachers are on the CENTA platform. So these are new concepts, new things that you didn't know about, right? And overall writing style. So in a nutshell, the overall writing style itself was also different. The first few were more expository in the sense, more factual in sense, and later it also got very descriptive, and there was also, some kind of opinions, etc. So in general, the parameters of reading levels of text depends on some of these factors, and that is the whole point of why we wanted to start with those passages, because each passage was at a different reading level, right? And how do we determine these reading levels? So there are various different entities or leveling systems that exist. I could have asked on the chat box, but I'm sure many of you may anyway know this. And in the interest of time, I'm just going to list down. So there is something called the ATOS, which has a leveling system of 0 to 9.0, right? So a most basic text would be at somewhere between a 0 to 2. And then as it progressed and got more advanced, the level would also progress. Then there's Flesh Kincaid, which is 0 to 100, the leveling systems. Then there's Lexile, which typically goes from 200L to 1700L. Fontas and Pinel, which is alphabets. It's not even numbers anymore. It's A to Z plus. Then there's Cambridge leveling system as well, which is A1 to C2. There's Gunning Fog, which goes 0 to 20. And there's many, many more leveling systems out there, right? This is just the tip of the iceberg, and there are so many more out there. And the point is, what is the meaning of reading level, right? Reading level of a child is basically the ability to read the text of a given reading level independently. So if I'm going to say the slide 1 was at a reading level 1, right? Then a child would be in a reading level 1 if the child can only read till reading level 1 fluently and beyond that is not able to read fluently, right? Or not able to read on their own independently. So how do reading levels correlate with what we tell about children? So reading level of a child is nothing but the ability of the child to read the text of a given reading level independently. So we cannot assume that just because our children are able to read something or not able to for one specific text, this is their reading level. It's something that has to be defined by the reading level of the text, and it's not that we automatically decide for the child, right? I'll just show you quick sample texts of different reading levels for you to get to be able to visualize what we mean. And the source, most of these are from NCRT English textbooks, grade 1, 3, and 10, and there's one from Cambridge which is at an A1 level. So this is what we call is an emergent reader. Someone who can read what is in the first text is what we would call an emergent reader. Someone who can read this second text, which has a lot of visuals, but some text connected with the visual, we would call them an early reader in general. And someone who is able to read text which is kind of broken down or short sentences, right, with a very clear title and an image describing it would be a transitional reader. And someone who can read a lot of text with vocabulary, new vocabulary, punctuations, and just image or even no image is someone we would call a fluent reader. So this is what we mean when we say reading levels. So there are texts at different reading levels, and our children, what level they belong to depends on till which reading level text can they read independently without any help. So the minute you give them a text which they are not able to read independently without help, then that would not be the level that they are at, right? Then they would be in the previous level that they are able to read fluently. So therefore, coming to just in a nutshell, right, summarizing about reading levels, we need to keep 4 simple stages in mind for each of our types of reader, which is emergent, early, transitional, and fluent. Let's look at the progression. An emergent reader, what are they typically, what they will be able to do? So typically an emergent reader will know sound symbol relationships, will be able to read and write CVC words, and mainly will be able to read CVC words and sight words, which are basically high frequency words, right? An early reader typically will be able to start understanding alphabets, will have phonological awareness, and will also be able to blend, segment, and read new words. A transitional reader typically will be able to comprehend, not just read, but also comprehend text independently. So you can see how from an early to a transitional, there's a shift happening from just reading to actually comprehending. They'll be able to distinguish different styles of text and also be able to distinguish different genres. And a fluent reader are basically successful readers in the sense they should be able to fluently read any text that's given to them. They should be able to read wide range of text independently and also comprehend the text and extend beyond the text, which means they should be able to read between the lines, like what we usually say, right? That's who we would call a fluent reader. And also predict, have opinions, and extend beyond the text. That's what it means. And typically exams like the CBSE board exam and PISA and other international exams like that assume that students are already fluent readers by the time they take up these exams, which is why you would notice in a CBSE or a PISA kind of exam, the language used is a bit advanced. It's not very simple language because the assumption is already made that by grade 10 or by grade 12, right? Whenever, and these are grade 10, 15-year-olds taken even a CPSE board exam, the 10th exam especially, you will notice that the papers are in a way which assumes that students are already fluent readers, which means by the time our children are at 50 are in grade 10, right, they should be able to successfully read on their own successfully read a wide range of text, and also comprehend and extend beyond what they're reading. So this is something that this is basically the goal state, right? So it's as teachers, we need to identify where are our students, which stage are they in, what can they typically do. It cannot be, we cannot fix it that a grade 1, grade 2 student is emergent, a grade 10 student is fluent. Not necessary. Even at a grade 1 or 2 level, a child may be very easily be able to read a higher level text and would be an early reader. Even at a grade 8, 9, or 10, a child may not be able to successfully read on their own or read independently, read a range of text, right? So they could be a transitional reader. So it's very important to keep this in mind and bucket which students are at which stage and help them progress to the next stage. Because, like I said, our exams already assume that our children are at a fluent reader stage. So I just want to keep this slide for another 5 to 10 seconds for all of you to just read and soak it in. And also, keep thinking about your own students and identify, do I have students in my class who I know very clearly fit under a certain bucket, and how do I push them to the next stage? Or who are the students who are already at a fluent reader stage, and how do I leverage them to help others get there as well? So I want you to think about some of these things when you're looking at this, and this was the whole point of why we also wanted to simulate this experience for you of having to read from a very lower level basic reading level text to a higher level text. Great. So we spoke about reading fluency, right? We spoke about how our exams assume students are already fluent readers, but it's very important to know that a reading fluency is not equal to reading comprehension. By this, we mean that just because I can read something very quickly need not mean that I can comprehend it as well. I'm understanding what I'm reading. A typical example would be, suppose I had to, read something in French or German. Of course, the language they use is English, right? The semantics, like whatever they write is in English, but so I should be able to fluently read what's written because that's written in English, but I will never be able to comprehend because I don't know the language, right? So that's a classic example of me having reading fluency because the text is English, but it's a different language, so I'm not able to comprehend anything that I'm reading. So reading comprehension, what does it refer to? It refers to understanding, analysis, forming context, making inferences. All of this is what we mean when we say reading comprehension, and it is not equal to reading fluency. Okay, so now that we have covered this much, I want to pause and I want to ask all of you, right? That do you think reading comprehension is something, of course we have heard this a lot in context of English, right? But do you think reading comprehension is something that is only pertaining to English, or is it also relevant to other subjects? If yes, can you give me an example of reading comprehension relevant in a subject you teach which is maybe not English? So in the chat box, quickly think about, I'm not an English teacher, but is reading comprehension relevant to my subject? If yes, can I think of an example where and how it's relevant? And when you think of that example, please put that down in the chat box. So think about reading comprehension and its relevance to your subject, which even if it's English, you can share that. And even if it's not English, how do you think reading comprehension is relevant to your subject? So Gurjeet ma'am is saying Hindi and Punjabi also. Yes, can you, languages, right? Like English, Hindi, Punjabi, these are all languages. And of course, comprehension is very, very important. What about other subjects, like STEM subjects, like science, math, social studies, physics, chemistry, like all the breakdown? Right? What about these subjects? Do you think reading comprehension is relevant here? If yes, can you give me an example? Rashmi ma'am has an excellent example, word problems in math. Exactly, right? To be able to, when you read a word problem, you need to be able to comprehend it, to be able to solve it. So Sudeepa ma'am is saying how children will be able to fare math or any subject. Yeah. So you're talking about relevance in subjects like math. So Savari ma'am says it's important in all subject. Monica ma'am says it's effective in science. Can you give an example, ma'am? Deepika ma'am is saying theoretical topics in computer. Yes, anything which where you're explaining something and you want the other person to absorb it and comprehend and understand it. Of course, comprehension skills are required, right? Marceline ma'am says relevant in terms of vocabulary, grammar, prepositions, tenses related to social science, math, measurements, time. Great. Even to be able to read a map. Zinat ma'am is telling about in social science, reading a map. Great example, right? Even being able to read a map which has like, it may not be fully textual, it has visual elements, but you need to be able to comprehend what you're looking at, right? When students have to solve numerics, come to a conclusion at the end of an experiment, make inferences. We usually call that experiment, observations, inferences. Great example, right? Great examples, and I think you all are like bang on right about relevance of math in other subjects, and that's exactly the point we were trying to make in today's workshop also, right? That reading comprehension is the basis for most formal learning, and it actually cuts across subjects, cuts across math, science, social, languages, of course. We already know that it's relevant in language. Let's look at some examples of where it's relevant in math. So solving word problems on mathematical concepts, operations, understanding theorems or corollaries of theorems and all of that, right? So everywhere you need to have comprehension skills. Similarly, in science, comprehending any scientific concept, reading about and applying them. Of course, in physics, we need to have a lot of application of the concept, right? Even in bio and chemistry. Providing reasoning for specific events. So, being able to provide reasoning evidence for why some specific events are happening, hypothesis at a higher level, even being able to form a hypothesis and compare it with other hypotheses. So, in science also, with all of these requires the most basic foundational skill is reading comprehension. Let's look at social science. Making inferences from a given case study. In civics, it's very relevant. In economics, in civics, synthesize opinions by referring to multiple contradicting sources covering the same law. So this becomes even more, or even like a historic element, right? It becomes very relevant because there's a lot of bias and opinion that comes into play. Summarize cause and effect of an event. Why did a certain battle happen? What was the reason it happened? What were the repercussions of it? All of this, again, the basis for all of this is reading comprehension. So you can see how it cuts across subjects, and therefore even this workshop, right, we are very, very happy to see a lot of teachers from different subjects joining, and I'm hoping there are many of you. You can maybe quickly put in the chat box what is the main subject you teach, because we want to know that this is not, and we want you to know this is not an English workshop. This is a workshop that's relevant for teachers teaching all subjects, because reading comprehension is a concept that's basis for the most formal learning that we try to inculcate in our students. So on that note, I'll pass it on to Upasna. But I'd love to see in the chat box all of you sharing what subjects you teach, and how how this workshop will actually be relevant for you as well. So I can see a lot of teachers, social science, math, Kannada. Great. Great to see teachers from different subjects joining us. Science, great to see you, Simi ma'am. Teaching science, we hope you find this equally relevant. Hindi, great. Okay, so math, happy to see math, ICT and BDT, psychology. Great, awesome to see so many of you teaching different subjects, all of you here in a workshop in reading comprehension. So I'm assuming you already know that it's a concept that cuts across different subjects. Great. Over to you, Upasna. Share it. 1 minute.
Thanks, Shruti. And I do want to appreciate each one of you actually, sharing your ideas in terms of how reading comprehension as a skill. It's a skill, and it's not just, again, a topic that you would cover only in English, is applicable to anything that you are actually doing, right? And I want to just quickly, before we go through the slides, want to just talk about one point that Sudeepa ma'am had brought about, saying that to be able to increase the learning gap, or sorry, I mean, bridge the learning gap, you need to be able to have your students be able to read and comprehend what they are reading independently. So which is why it's very, very crucial that all of us, irrespective of the subject areas that we are actually working in, understand how to build reading comprehension skills, right? And so we'll see all of that in detail today. So the next section that we are going to work with is going to be talking about main reading comprehension skills, and what are the various approaches that we will need to build these skills in students, and we'll look at them through some practice questions. So always believe in a lot of activity based and interactive and engaging sessions. So I'm glad that we are all being very engaging at this point of the day, and would love to continue with that. Right. So I'm seeing a lot of good examples again. And before, just want to call out, I think a few of you, Tasneem ma'am, you talked about case studies in social science, especially political science. So I think, so be able to interpret things accurately. I think RC skills are very, very critical. Right. So now, again, so this is a picture that all of us as educators are probably very, very familiar with. This is the Bloom's taxonomy, the pyramid for Bloom's taxonomy. And without going to intricate details of each of those levels, so we have just created a gist of starting from remembering to creating. What we want to now look at is um, what are the different skills, not just specific to zooming in, so not just specific to English, but what are the actual skills that align to each of these levels of Bloom's taxonomy, but takes into account reading comprehension. So let's just look at some of those examples. And the first one, starting off with remembering, I hope you're able to see the screen, or read on the screen. I'll read it out as well. In languages, some questions like when and where did the story take place, or make a list of the main events. So listing and sequencing of skills need for you to be able to apply RC skills, and irrespective of what the language or what the medium is going to be. Next, at an understanding level, so an example from science, write a summary reports. A lot of you actually gave good examples from science. Summary report listing down observations of experiment. So again, I'm going to just take the liberty to say this is also applicable in social science, right? Like what you've observed is what you're writing a summary report, and that plays out well on the understanding level. Gurjeet ma'am, if you're not able to read it, I'm reading it out for you as well. So I hope you're able to follow. At the application level, we have an example from math. Solve the given word problem using unitary method. So I think, some of you gave this specific example when Shruti was talking about application of RC in various subjects outside of the languages. At an analyzed level, and analyzed level, we have an example from social studies. Again, this is not an exhaustive list. There are plenty of other subjects that we can find, or types of questions in subjects that we can find alignment to each of these Bloom's levels. So social studies, and analyze type of a question would be compare and contrast the events of the first and second battle of Panipat, and you can replace the content with anything. And even questions like differentiate between two different elements in social studies, and it could be geography, content, history, political science, whatever you teach, right? At an evaluate level, we have a question from science. Explain the given hypothesis and share which part of the hypothesis you do not fully agree with. And here needs it needs for the students to be able to not just read but comprehend and understand, and then be able to give their own opinion or rationale as to what they understand, right? So very, very critical. And at a create level, very good examples from language rewrite the given story by changing the genre from comedy to tragedy. Now you could change the content here completely. And similarly, if you have to create your own experiment at a create level, you would need to be able to understand what the guidelines are, and hence and that requires for your students to be able to have good RC skills, right? So great. So if you have, been able to correlate it, I mean, if you're able to see it, the screen, I just would pause here for a few seconds for you to quickly also go through it and see if these are not the examples that you thought of, sort of quickly skim through the examples that we have shared, and you may continue to share some of your examples in the chat. And thank you, Sudeepa ma'am, as she suggests, you could change your screen settings to 720, which will allow you to actually read the screen. All right. So now moving on, what are the main reading comprehension skills at different cognitive levels, right? So Shruti very beautifully described the different reading levels that students are at. Now just mapping these RC skills to different cognitive levels. So let's look at those. Again, going from the most basic one, which is remembering. Now some skills that we need to do is try and recall who said what to whom, or what happened when. So some sequencing skills, some recall skills that come at a remembering level, but need for students to be able to comprehend the text that's given. Understanding skills that are aligned are visualizing, summarizing, identifying main idea, and sequencing. Applying, when you're asking your students to make connections, so it could be either connection between two parts of a text, or one text with another text, or maybe even like making connections from what they read in and to their own life, right? So applying some of those kinds of things. And all of us know that application is there in multiple subjects that we teach. Inferencing or drawing conclusions, so very very relevant to science as well, not just English. When it comes to analyzing, problem solving, questioning, relating background knowledge, so what you already know of, and then how do you apply it to the text that's given in front of you. We saw an example of comparing and contrasting. Identifying mood, tone, genre, cause and effect, right? So cause and effect, very classic kind of a question that we see is from science or even geography, right? What is the cause of a natural event, and what happens, or what is the effect of that, right? So all of these are um, uh, aligned to the analysis or analyzing as a cognitive level. And finally, at the highest level, we have evaluating and creating. So self monitor, review what you've done, review someone else's work as well. So monitoring as well, distinguishing between fact and opinion, right? So what are different points of information that's given to you, and what is it that stands out as someone's opinion rather than just and very very relevant when you also teach social science for that matter, being able to differentiate between from a text, differentiate between what is factual in nature and what is being put forward as someone's opinion, and also making predictions what might happen, right? Like so classic examples from science, again social science, and of course even in English, making predictions about how the story might end. So these are various comprehension skills at different cognitive level, starting from remembering, and the higher we go on the cognitive level, the different kinds of skills that we could sort of apply RC skills to. But given the short span of time that we are here today with you for, we're only going to be focusing on a few of those, and those are going to be summarizing, identifying I'll go in a sequence: identifying main idea and supporting details, summarizing, and inferencing and drawing conclusions. So these are four basic skills that we're going to be focusing, and somewhere in the middle of the entire spectrum, so should be able to correlate it to others as well. Jayanti ma'am says competency-based structure. It is added in the question paper for social science. Case study and source-based questions will be there. Little easy to score marks, right? So, of course, like social science is a very and case study type of questions in social science are a very classic example of how RC skills are put in place, right? So, of course, we apply that not just to social science, like Sudeepa ma'am says, in English as well. And we have started seeing a lot of these questions come up in the in the case, in a case study manner, even in math for that matter, right? And so, and of course, science is a natural fit too. So no matter what subject you are teaching, and of course I can imagine this in computer science too, if some of you are ICT teachers, right? So no, exactly, so no rote learning is required. As long as you're able to comprehend, then apply what needs to be done, right? So like I said, we are focusing on four skills. The first one being summarizing and main idea. So we introduced a few reading texts to you. We're going to reuse that. So and what we're going to do is we're going to work with this exact text throughout our webinar, so that we're not toggling between different kinds of text. The main idea is for you to for us to sort of discuss how the skills can be built and the approach towards that. So but let's assume this is what your students have in front of them. Your students need to write a summary of this passage. We'll give you uh, you know about a couple of minutes to just quickly go through this text. So we hope you're able to see it. I'll quickly read through this thing just so that you're also, if you're not able to see it on the screen, you are able to follow. Welcome to the workshop on reading comprehension RC skills. This is a collaborative effort between BSSCA and CENTA to support teachers from CBSE schools, which are a part of BSSCA, to build RC skills in students preparing for board examinations. Reading comprehension is the ability to process text, understand its meaning, and to integrate with prior knowledge. For example, reading about the Quit India movement and comparing how it was different from the First World War of Independence. RC skills lead to synthesis of information and prediction of outcomes based on situations. Based on what would be relevant for teachers, CENTA chose this topic. Not just English, but teachers teaching other subjects are also welcome, since the topic cuts across all learning. Since the first BSSCA Center workshop, there has been a 51% increase in the number of teachers participating. Currently, 1,000 plus BSSCA teachers are also leveraging learning resources and MCQ quizzes post these workshops. In today's workshop, teachers will not only engage in an interactive learning session, but also arm themselves with key strategies to implement in their classrooms. All right. So now, quickly, just a couple of things to understand you and your students. If you had to give this to your students, to write a summary of this passage, what percentage of your class do you think would be able to write a good summary, right? So if you could just put down percentage based on how well you understand your classroom. If you could just put down in percentage, this is the percentage of my students who will be able to write a good summary of this passage. Just quick responses in the chat box. So अगर आप अपने क्लास में ये पैसेज देते हैं, तो कितने कितने प्रतिशत लोग, कितने परसेंटेज ऑफ योर स्टूडेंट्स इस पैसेज का बढ़िया समरी लिख पाएंगे? गुरजीत कौर मैम says 60, Monica ma'am says 90% of her students, Ruchita Rai ma'am says 90% of her students will be able to write. Great. Just waiting for a few more. Usha ma'am says 70%. Out of 30, 10% would write excellent. So Sudeepa ma'am says 10% of her 30 students. And Kavita ma'am says 75%. Great. So I'm sure in your mind you would know how much, which, and you can also like visualize which are those students who will be able to produce a good summary and which of those will need help, right? So thank you for your responses. And also like now that you're thinking about it, what are some common challenges that they may face in trying to write a good summary? Some quick responses. What are some challenges, problems that they might face? Thank you everyone for sharing the percentage in the chat, but also looking for, just a quick few words in terms of, what are some challenges that they might face. So Deepa ma'am says vocabulary. Vocabulary is going to be one of the challenges. Anuradha ma'am says reading and understanding the passage. Vijay Lakshmi ma'am says equivalent vocabulary. Okay, great. Chetna ma'am says grammar and vocabulary. So to be able to write it in good grammar and use the right set of vocabulary. Monica ma'am says correlation. Would love to understand a little more what correlation would mean. Vocabulary connect. Okay, all right. So Aarti ma'am says comprehending. Yeah, so that's pretty much the premise of which what we're trying to do. Kavita ma'am says sentence formation. Okay, so these are some of the challenges. So now let's look at, what are the steps that we would actually implement to write a good summary, right? And this is something that we hope you're able to take back to your class. So now the first step is noting down the main pieces of information as words or short phrases. And one quick way of doing this is, or a good way of doing this is annotating, right? So it's a practical way, and we've all done this in some or the other manner. Annotating, as you can, is visible on the screen, is underlining. So or highlighting, right? So your students might use a highlighter. They may just, underline using their pencils while they read. So right, so different ways of doing it. As kids, some of us would also write numbers, in increasing or decreasing order of priority, or circling star marks, whatever. So annotating the entire text that's out there, right? So and that's what we have shown. So several of the phrases have been annotated here. So that's your step one. Now we have understood what needs to be annotated, but is everything crucial, right? So what is important versus what is not important? Too important to make that distinction between. So now I've annotated every single thing that seemed important to me, but is it important for what I'm trying to do? Like, so summarizing, right? Now we need to make those choices. How do we make those choices, right? So we've annotated. Now we need to make a choice between what is important and what is not important. How do we do that, right? So again, one good way, or one suggested way to do this is by using some sort of a flow chart, some sort of like a graphic organizer, right? So this is an example of a graphic organizer. If you could just quickly put it in the chat box to say what are different. So you have a graphic organizer where we are talking about the entire passage, and then we're talking about, headings under which each of those points could, categories, and then sequencing the different sets of information according to those categories. Now this is one example. What are some other examples of graphic organizers that you have probably used in your class, or your students might be using? Again, you can use the chat box and share your thoughts. What are some good examples, or what are some examples of other graphic organizers that you've used? Okay, so Jayanti ma'am says concept mind mapping. Great. Looking for some, one or two more responses. So you could use a concept map, you could use a mind map, you could use a, so Alka ma'am says LWL charts. Great. Venn diagrams. Mohsina ma'am says Venn diagrams are a good way of are a good graphic organizer to sort of use to prioritize what is important, right? Now, so at this step that we are in, so we've already annotated. Now we're deciding what is important, right? What versus what is not important. So now we're going to create those broad categories so that we know that the information that we're looking for are actually, important, and hence we can sequence them under the right category, right? So the column headers would be filled. Now, at this step, we have all the key points. So, if Shruti, if you can just go back to the slide that had annotations on it. Right. So now, if you look at it now, as someone who's trying to summarize it, I have all of these points. Now, I want to see where do these points fit in, right? So I'm trying to see what is similar between each of these points. And so, if we go to the slide which had the flow chart, right? So now each of those points that were highlighted or underlined in this case, we have put them in these pink boxes, which according to what we think could form like a where we see the points have like a good alignment between them, right? So there are 5 such broad sections, if you will, that we have made. And now looking at the kind of point that it is, we'd see what are the broad categories that can be formed out of this, right? So for instance, all the points about BSSCA CENTA collaboration for teachers on reading comprehension are at a broad level about the workshop. What is the purpose of the workshop? Everything that is for processing text, understanding its meaning, integrating with prior knowledge is about the topic, which is what is reading comprehension. Synthesis of information, prediction of outcomes, and based on situations is talking about the importance of reading comprehension. So I cannot put this in any of the previous two categories, right? So similarly, key strategies to implement in their classrooms, prep for board exams, are what is it that we're looking for, as an outcome for this particular workshop. And finally, 51% increase in webinar participation and 1,000 plus teachers accessing learning resource is what we categorized as level of teacher interest. Now, this is how we have approached this. Of course, when we try to apply this to, again, same passage or something else, the categories might change based on what are some of the key points, important points, and what is the kind of alignment that we are looking at, right? And like we said, and like so many of you have given so many suggestions, word web, tree factor, word chart, mind maps, you could use any of these to create a proper structure so that you're able to differentiate between what is important and what is not important in a given set of text, right? So we'll quickly spend like about 5 seconds just on the previous one, 5 seconds to just look at the way we have categorized and sequenced the information before we move on to the next part. All right. So as we move on, the next step is we've understood what are the categories based on which the priority the items that we had annotated, or the phrases that we had annotated. Now, after the categorization's been done, we want to expand on the key messages or ideas in our own words. So, as a lot of you had said, how is it that my students are able to write it in using good vocabulary or in proper grammar or use sentences to connect? So this is the stage that we are at, right? So, and we're using one idea, the level of teacher interest. It's just one of the categories that we're using. Of course, you can do this with all the other categories that we had, and the two points within that were 51% increase in workshop participation and 1,000 plus teachers access learning resources and MCQs. What we'd like to do is, again, use this opportunity to engage you all in an activity. Please go to Mentimeter right now. So using the link www.menti.com, if you already have it open in different tab, you can still access that. And otherwise, log into this and use the code 921210009. We have a question over there for you, which is, which of the following best summarizes the given information, right? So the next question should be on your screen, which is, which of the following best summarizes the given information? And there are 4 options in front of you on the Mentimeter, which is is it option A? The initiative has seen increased workshop participation. I beg your pardon. Teachers are continuously participating in quizzes related to pedagogical topics. Or is it C? Teachers are benefiting from the workshops and learning resources. Or is it D? The initiative has seen high teacher interest in both workshops and resources. So please go on to the Menti link. I'm just putting it on the chat as well. This is the code. So which of the following best summarizes the given information? And the information that we're using is on to the left of the question on the screen right now. Level of teacher interest. And within that, 51% increase in workshop participation and 1,000 plus teachers access learning resources and MCQ quizzes. Some of you are putting your answers in the chat box. That's fine too. But we'd really encourage you to use Menti, your experience with Menti, so that you can actually use that in your classrooms. This is a wonderful tool to drive quizzes in your classrooms. We already see 11 people who have responded. We're just waiting for a few more responses. And based on what I can see, majority of you have gone with B. Not saying that that's the right answer. We'll just give a few more seconds for more responses. On the chat box though, the split is between D and C. Several of you say C, several of you say D as well. Right now we have, even the Menti result shows most of you voting for option D, then C. No one's gone for B. There's one person who has voted A. All right, thank you, Shruti, for sharing this. Okay, so now that we've all engaged in this as students, let's look at what the right answer is. Indeed, D. The initiative has seen high teacher interest in both workshops and uses of resources. And what makes, and so if it was your students who were to answer this, why is it that they should have chosen D, and what does it do for what does it tell you about their misconceptions if they chose any of the other options, right? So let's look at the insights. Now here we are looking, and this is step 4, we're looking for the information. So the 2 sets of information that were given, have they covered both sets of information while they wrote their answers? Plus, have they avoided any sort of personal opinion that might be given? Because the expectation is, which is the best summary using that set of information, right? So A, they should have covered both sets of information and not just one, and they should have avoided any personal opinion, any bias, or even extra facts from outside, right? So without any of these assumptions. Now, if these were the 2 parameters to evaluate their responses, let's look at what kind of misconception is coming up. Now, if someone had chosen A, it is incorrect. It's a closed option. In our terms, we would say it's a closed choice. However, it misses out on the focus of the learning resource, right? Because the first one just talks about the workshop participation. It doesn't talk about the interest in the resources that teachers have, shown, right? So they are not covering both sets of information. Option B is incorrect, and I don't see anyone voting for that. which is teachers are continuously participating in quizzes related to pedagogical topics. Now, this is not an information that's given in the passage, right? Which wasn't one of the boxes that we had. So they missed out on the workshop and they use additional information which is not given in the passage, and hence it's an incorrect option. Option C, this is not a fact from the passage. So some of you had actually, a lot of you had actually put down C. Teachers are benefiting from the workshops and learning resource. That's an assumption. Even though the participation is increasing, right now we don't really know that, right? It's not a fact from the passage. It's a possible inference, but really definitely not a summary, because here we are putting in possibly some assumption over there. Option D is correct. Now, this is the only option that covers both aspects, does not have any extra facts from outside, and there is no one's opinion that's being factored in to, in this particular option. So now this is a great way to understand whether your students are able to write a summary of any passage for that matter. Quick two checks: are they covering all the sets of information, and have they avoided any sort of personal bias or opinion for that matter, and like not bringing in any extra facts? Then you know that your students are able to write the kind of summary that you want them to write, right? So once you have this, we will then look at the next step. Right. So when you create MCQs for your students, try to check such misconceptions in summarizing. So another myth that we also wanted to dispel through this is summarizing as a skill can also be evaluated through MCQs. And when you are actually creating questions, MCQs, and you are placing your options, you can have these misconceptions be your options, which could help you understand what is the level at which your students are able to write a summary, right? Okay. All right, Shruti, over to you.
Yeah. Okay, so we have looked at the first four steps to summarize, and at this point, we are still at the summarizing stage. We have not come to the main idea. So, Upasana very beautifully showed us what the 5 steps are with an excellent example, right? And the whole point of that example was to get all of you to try it out and actually use that to understand what are some of the things that our students may be getting wrong. Like they may be bringing extra facts that they have inferred, but it's not even given in the passage, or they may have put their own opinion or bias, right? So some of these things are what we need to cross check, and we did that by creating an MCQ, in which actually the three incorrect options had some of these points: extra facts, biases, and some inference, and also assumptions, like making implicit assumptions, like what we discussed in our first session, right, on MCQ creation. You cannot make implicit assumptions. Great. So now that we looked at our 4 steps, so step 1 was um, to note down the main pieces as words or short phrases. And of course, we did that using annotating. Step 2 was to structure the information in broad categories and sequence them. And of course, graphic organizer is just one tool. There are many other tools that you can use to structure information and sequence. Step 3 was to expand on the key messages or ideas in your own words, right? We cannot directly, if you're using the direct words, then that's not a summary. So it's about expanding it, and we used one example to do that. And step 4 was to actually cross check coverage of information, avoid opinion bias, extra facts. Now, in step 5, what we have is actually we're putting everything together. So you can quickly take a minute, and or rather 10 seconds in the interest of time, and see how we have put the summary together using the structuring and sequencing we had done. So you can see how we have not directly copy pasted words or lines from the actual passage, which is what mostly typically goes wrong, right? When we're writing a summary, we copy paste what's in the passage. It's about expanding from what's given and listing down crisp points, which is what we have done based on that 5 buckets that we got in our structuring stage. And we have also cross-checked for extra coverage, no extra facts, personal bias, all of that check is done. When you read this, you will realize that. So I'm going to move on in another 5 seconds. So you can see the summary that we have put together, keeping all the first 4 points in mind. So step 5 was to put the summary together. And in step 6, now that we are done with the entire bit on summarizing, now comes the part about finding that one main or central idea. And again, we're going to do this through a quick question that all of you have to answer. This is basically whatever points we have put together, we have created a summary. It was bullet points, we have converted that to a paragraph, and we are telling this is our summary. Now, how do we find the main idea or central idea? That was the task, to find the one main or central idea. For that, very important to first create your summary. Now that you have your summary, which of the following best describes the main idea of this passage? So you have your 4 options here. Once again, go to menti.com, enter the passcode 921210009, and let's be quick. We only have another 10 minutes more to go, and we have quite a lot to cover in the workshop. So we would want all of you to just be very quick. Go here and think about which one do you think best describes the main idea of this passage. Okay, let's quickly see what some of you have shared. Okay, so a lot of you are saying 5, not a lot, but okay, 6 of you are saying it's C, which is BSSCA CENTA workshop on strategies to build reading comprehension. That's the main idea. One of you is telling what is reading comprehension and why it's important for teachers. Okay, let's just wait for maybe 2 more seconds. So I can see a lot of you saying C is the correct answer, which is it's the workshop on building strategies, on strategies to build reading comprehension. Great. Okay, now let's quickly come back and see what the correct answer is. As you can see, the correct answer is C, which is it is the workshop on strategies to build reading comprehension. Now, once again, let's look at why is the correct answer and the incorrect one's not correct. And this also kind of, you can see what we're trying to do here, right? We're trying to use practice exercises and the insights from that to kind of navigate through what we mean when we say find one main or central idea. And what do we mean by that? Like the main idea, basically you need to ask questions about why is the text written, about what or whom it is mainly, for whom it is mainly. So we are kind of breaking down every step and sub-step using an exercise for all of you. So let's look at the incorrect options first. Option A is incorrect because the passage does not talk about BSSCA CENTA initiatives in general, but just about this particular workshop, right? If you see A, just talks about teacher development, but this, so it's not specific enough, which is why that's incorrect. Option B is incorrect because the passage mentions what reading comprehension is and why it's important only as a supporting aspect for this workshop rather than as the purpose of this workshop, right? What is B? What is reading comprehension? Why it's important? So it's talking about, it's saying that's the main idea, but that's not just what the main idea is. It's also, the passage is mainly about doing it for you all, right? About BSSCA CENTA and about the strategies. It's not just about what is reading comprehension, why it's important. That's not what we have covered. We have covered much more than that. So this is an incomplete main idea. See, D is incorrect because passage mentions that as an afterthought to inspire more teachers to join, but does not focus on the details of that. If you see D, it says engagement by teachers in workshop and on learning resource. That's not the main thought. In this passage, we mentioned that as an afterthought or as a result or outcome of the workshops that we have been doing. That's a testimony of how the workshops have been. And option C, therefore, is correct because the passage is about the workshop while adding inputs on why the workshop is important and how teachers are already engaging with us, right? It's very specific and very focused, talks about the what the workshop is BSSCA CENTA. It talks about what is covered in the workshop, builds using strategies to build reading comprehension, and also talks about how teachers have been engaged. So when you create MCQs, we keep bringing this point back because, like in our first workshop, we discussed MCQ creation is a skill that's very relevant for teachers at the moment. So when you create MCQs, try to, or in general, right, when you're teaching this to students, try to check for such misconceptions in main idea. Are they giving an incomplete one? Are they giving a main idea which is not even related, or which is more like an afterthought, but the student has thought that's the most important thing? So that could be because of some bias that they come in with. So these are important things to keep in mind when you're looking for, you're checking for misconceptions in main idea, right? Okay, now let's quickly look at what are some sample activities across subjects that you can use to build summarizing skills. As I'm listing this down, you can also in the chat box quickly list down what are some sample activities you have used or you want to use or you have been, plan to use, etc., to build summarizing skills in students. So, a good example in English, very simple, I think very common as well, to read a novel and tell the class the story in 10 minutes. So, you have to read a full 200, 250, or 400, 300 page novel and tell the class the story in 10 minutes. Of course, in this case, students will have to summarize. In math, read the step by step process to solve a given problem, arrive at a short method to reach the same solution. So there's a huge, or a theorem. This is a step by step process for a problem, even a theorem, right? Read the entire 2-page theorem and then, in a short, simple way, explain what the theorem is about. So in math, that's a relevant example. In science, conduct a survey about the usage of water in your area and share your main findings. So these are very relevant and very, very practical examples that all of us in our subjects have actually been doing. So I'm assuming some of you are also listing it down in the chat box. In the interest of time, I'm not going to be reading it. Why we do the chat box exercise is to engage all of you and for all of you to read, what the other teachers are sharing to understand their perspective, because we are a group here. So we want to learn together as a group. So I'm hoping you're all listing down in the chat box. And on that note, I'll just pass it on to Upasna, who will quickly take us through what is the steps involved, just like how we discussed summarizing an main idea, 6 steps. Upasna will also, which was, yeah, till finding one main or central idea. Upasna will quickly take us through the steps involved in making inferences and drawing conclusion. Over to you, Upasna.
Sure. Thank you, Shruti. So again, we're going to be skimming through this very quickly, but we'll of course talk about the main points just in the interest of time, and hoping, if we just spill over by a few minutes, it should be okay with some of you. All right. So these are the next. So we've already seen main idea and how to summarize. How do we bring about the inferences, or how do we draw a conclusion from a given passage? This is the same passage that we had used for the previous 2 skills. So we're using the same one. Now quickly let's look at the activity that's aligned to it. Okay. Now, just in the interest of time, we will not go to the Menti. We'll display the question here itself. Which of the following inferences is most plausible based on the above passage? So it's the same passage that we spoke about. Which of the following inferences is most plausible based on the above passage? Is it A, reading comprehension is the most important skill to do well in CBSE board exams? B, without reading comprehension skills, it is difficult for students to master formal learning. Is it C, RC skills do not help in finding outcomes of a scientific experiment? Or is it D, reading comprehension skills are common across languages and not specific to English? So again, using the same passage, which of the following inferences is most plausible? Thank you, Amandeep ma'am, for sharing your response in the chat. Would encourage all of you to do that on the chat itself. Is it A, B, C, or D? Some of you are saying D. Actually, all of you who've responded have said D. All right, let's look at what is the right answer. And I think only Simi ma'am so far and Vijay Lakshmi ma'am got it right, who have said B. So B is the most plausible inference based on the above passages. Now let's look at, again, in the form of insights, why that is the most plausible inference, and also how do we make sure, again taking notes around how should we make sure that these are some MCQs that we're able to frame and hence work with the misconceptions that might commonly be there. Now option B is correct. That's the correct option because the second paragraph indicates how RC skills are foundational to different kinds of learning, whether it is math, science, social science. Hence it can be inferred that without these skills it's difficult for students to master their formal learning. And we talked a little bit about it at the beginning of the session itself. Now if someone was to pick option A, which is the incorrect option. Why is it incorrect? Because obviously other skills also that are so it says that it's important for you to do well in CBSE board exams, but this is not just not the only skill that will help you to do well in the board exams. And yeah. And furthermore, while the passage emphasizes on the importance of reading comprehension, it does not imply that it is the most important skill. And hence, if someone was to sort of like pick that, that is why it would be an incorrect option, right? Option C, this is the most incorrect inference. RC skills help in inferring outcomes by analyzing scientific experiments. We have seen multiple types of questions by now that tell us the direct correlation between understanding how RC skills work in science. And option D is incorrect because RC skills are language agnostic. So we've gotten responses from this group itself saying how this is applicable to Hindi, Punjabi, Kannada, etc. Right? So now let's move on to the next part, which is open-ended questions versus close-ended questions. Right? Shruti?
I hope everybody is able to hear me. Okay, great. Okay, so I mean, in the question we discussed, and like Upasana said, we may extend a bit because we also started late. We were waiting for many of you to join. So we'll just maybe try to wrap up in the next 10 minutes. I hope that's okay with everyone. Okay, so we just looked at a question on making inferences, right? We asked you what is the most plausible inference. Now let's look at what is the premise, like what are the steps to actually make an inference. And when we think about drawing inferences, right, there are two kinds of questions that we actually need to ask to even begin with making inferences. Oh, I think I'm on mute. Am I audible? Okay. So we'll quickly come back to this. So Upasana discussed about a question on making an inference for that passage that we had, right? Now what we're going to do is we're going to look at, in order to even make inferences, what are the two broad kinds of questions we need to be asking. So this is more like step one of making inferences, right? Firstly, we need to know that there are two types of questions, which are open-ended inference questions and close-ended inference question. By open-ended, we mean what all plausible inferences can you make based on the given text, fact, visual, etc. And in close-ended, it's like I am making a certain inference. Is that correct? Or is the given inference actually plausible or can be made based on the text, fact, or visual, right? I'll quickly show you some examples of what we mean by open-ended inference. So here are the examples. An historian uses archaeological evidence to understand life in a period. A doctor uses symptoms or tests to diagnose what the underlying disease may be. Business leader guessing reasons for decline in sales. So this is like everything possible, the entire plethora of inferences that you can make. In a close-ended situation, it's the context is more close-ended, which is it's just one scenario. We're just testing if what we are saying is that even anything related to the passage, right? So you can quickly check the points here. Historian analyzing if practices from a particular period explain a current social evil. Doctor checking symptoms to see if the patient has COVID or dengue. A business leader understanding if the product price is too high based on a market survey. So it's a direct correlation of what an open-ended versus a closed-ended inference question looks like. So this is just broadly about how to approach the process of drawing inferences, right? But the most important starting point, so that's the approach, but the most important starting point for building inferencing skills, or inferring skills rather, that all of us need to know is that we make inferences all the time anyway, right? This is something that's wired in our brain, that we automatically do it without actually structuring it or anything. For example, if we see a balcony is wet, automatically our brain thinks, oh, it probably rained last night. Similarly, here are a few other examples. These all happen automatically, and it's not something that we need to process, think about, reflect about, and then we come to this. We make such inferences all the time. And I'm sure you all have made such inferences. You can even, quickly in the chat box, I will continue, but you can keep listing down what are some examples of inference you made maybe today. This is something we do on a daily basis, right? Just think of one inference you made today based on something you saw or read or noticed. It's very important to understand that we do this anyway. It's a very natural process for us. So let's see, but if this process, which is so natural and literally like what our brain does, let's break down exactly how our brain does this, right? What is the core process of making inference? So basically, we will use this passage as context. Basically, there is some existing knowledge that I already have. So I need to read word problems in math. I need to read a lot of text in history, etc. I already know this. Many of you also shared this, right? Reading comprehension cuts across subjects. I know I need to be able to do these things. This is my existing knowledge. Now let's look at today, what did I come across? So the available evidence of what I came across today in the passage was this. So reading comprehension is the ability to process text, understand meaning, integrate with prior knowledge. RC skills lead to synthesis, prediction. So I'm underlining what is the evidence I'm seeing in the passage which connects with the existing knowledge. And therefore, this is the new understanding I have got today. Right? So I already knew I need to be able to read to do math, science, socials, history, all of that. Today I saw that what is reading comprehension exactly, and now I know that reading comprehension skills is what is foundational to formal learning. Applicability cuts across different subjects. Right? As teachers, this is a new understanding I've had if I've not already had it. And in reading, this evidence that we have underlined in blue, they are actually called textual clues, and they are fundamental or core to making inferences. And this is how our brain also does it. We already know something very subconsciously. We look at something and we kind of pick out evidences from that, and then we have a new understanding that our brain is creating. And therefore, textual clues are the most important element to keep in mind when we are thinking of making inferences from any passage, summary of a passage, right? So therefore, as teachers also, we know naturally there are some things that we are going to make assumptions or we are going to make inferences, but it's important to ask students to stretch and make all plausible inferences, various guesses, right? Plausible and not right. It need not be the most right thing, but we should ask students to actually stretch and make all possible inferences they can. So if the balcony is wet, it could also be because a maid just washed it, right? If my friend is looking sad, it could also be because maybe I said something that's upset him, or it could be something that happened in his or her house. So basically asking students to stretch and listing down everything that's plausible. By plausible meaning which is possible. So if balcony is wet, I cannot say, oh, it rained into my balcony if you have a closed balcony. So we should think of things that are plausible, need not be right, but not impossible ones. Right? And visuals can be used powerfully in building these inferring skills in students. So these are some examples of how the minute we see something, directly our brain is wired to make an inference, right? There's literally nothing written, but our brain is already thinking about what this could be about. So you can see some examples we have put, literally using images to build inferring skills, and therefore very important in our lessons, in our classes, in our tech that we are using, to use a lot of visual elements and not just text to build the skills in our students. And now coming to the question of how do I know whether an inference is plausible or not, especially when there are many conflicting inferences, right? Like we have made a lot of inferences. We have asked our students to do it. Now, now I have to basically funnel or filter it. I have to check which one is plausible, which one is not. Now, this is something we do in real life as well. And this is what we can do in real life, right? We can find more data points or evidence that they basically confirm or negate the inference. We go back to our own prior knowledge or someone else's and try to understand, okay, is this even plausible? And reflect carefully to understand if is this our own bias or opinion, or is this actually plausible in the given scenario. In a reading comprehension exam, how do we know if the inference we're making is plausible? We need to read the text for more clues, concentrate on why the writer has used specific phrases. We need to be very, very cognizant and conscious when we are reading. Think about what can be assumed as universal or accepted facts on the same topic, like a universal fact, which direction the sun rises in is a universal thing. It's a truth. So if that's an assumption we can already make, great. Or am I bringing in personal bias? Reflect carefully to understand, again, if you're bringing your own personal bias or opinion, and that's how you basically filter out in the list of inferences I've made which is plausible versus which is not, especially when there are conflicting ones, right? So again, coming back to this point we discussed about objective versus subjective assessments, it's also very, very relevant to when we have to summarize or make inferences, right? What is a fact which is highly objective to a conclusion we make using a passage which again is objective to an inference which comes somewhere in between, moving on to a hypothesis, prediction, and finally an opinion which is fully subjective. So this is basically the spectrum of objective versus subjective in terms of making inferences. Inference is somewhere in between. So it's important to know in that range when we are asked to infer or summarize something, how that should be more objective versus when we are asked to share our opinion about something, that should be more subjective. Important to know that entire spectrum and where inferencing comes in that spectrum. So in the interest of time, I'm not going to again use Mentimeter, and just quickly, we're going to, now that we discussed making inferences and we looked at conclusion, right? We looked at how conclusion is more objective rather than subjective. Let's quickly check your understanding using a question. Which of the following is not a conclusion that can be drawn based on the paragraph that we have multiple times we have read through now? It's just a quick check of understanding. So some of these options, some of them may have some bias in them, some of them may be an opinion, some of them may be a prediction, right? So try to eliminate all of that and objectively think which one is a conclusion very objectively made from the passage. I'll give you exactly 10 seconds, 5 seconds to do this, not 10, just in the interest of time. So we will wrap up in the next 4 to 5 minutes. Okay, so let me quickly see what are some answers. So you don't have to do it in menti.com. You can just quickly answer here. So Sanjeet Kumar sir, I think I very clearly showed what is the difference between inference and conclusion, right? Inference can have some element of subjectivity, it comes in between. So inference, you may make an inference based on your own bias, you may make an inference based on the passage, but conclusion is highly objective. It is based on what is given and not based on what you're saying, unless it's an opinion piece. Then it's based on what your opinion was. Okay, so I'm displaying the question again, and I'm just waiting for some responses on the chat box. Okay. Which of the following is not a conclusion that can be drawn based on the paragraph? There has been a significant increase in participation from teachers in the BSSCA CENTA workshop. A. B. In addition to the workshop, BSSCA teachers have also shown interest in using learning resources and quizzes. C. Teachers participating and using MCQ quizzes are telling other teachers about them, therefore leading to more participation. D. While teachers will gain an understanding of RC skills, they will also need to practice the strategies in the classroom. What is it? Not a conclusion that can be drawn? Okay, I can see that there's a lot of you saying C and D. It's a combination of C and D. Okay, let's look at what the correct answer is. The correct answer is C. which is basically teachers participating in workshops and using MCQ quizzes are telling other teachers about them, therefore leading to more participation. Because we mentioned that there has been a 51% increase in participation, right? So this is a plausible inference, but it is not a conclusion. So why we are saying this is not a conclusion is because though this is plausible, it is not. So it's a subjective bias could be there in this, but it's not a conclusion. The increase in participation could have been driven in many different ways, right? The increase in participation could have been because we sent out emails to more teachers, or it could have been because more teachers are available. They are done with their schedules and they are able to join. It could be various different reasons. So we cannot assume that it's because teachers are telling other teachers about it. So this is the correct answer. Option A is incorrect because the participation in the workshops increased by 51%. Hence, it is a valid conclusion that there has been a significant increase in participation, right? Option B is incorrect because since there are 1,000 plus teachers who are engaging on learning resources, this is a statement that can be concluded. So we can conclude that teachers are participating in workshops. They're also using MCQ quizzes and telling other teachers, which is leading to more participation because we've seen way more teachers there than who are even in the workshop. So it is a fair conclusion. D is incorrect because this can be concluded since the workshop's aim is to provide strategies that can be practiced in the classroom, right? So our hope is that what you've understood in the workshop, you're directly taking back and practicing in your classroom. So it is a conclusion, and that's the whole point of why we are doing the workshop in the way we are doing it. So it is a fair conclusion. So the question was, which is not a conclusion? C is the correct answer. So coming back to Sanjeev Kumar sir's question, right? This is the difference between an inference. We can make an inference, but that inference necessarily need not be the conclusion. Conclusion has to be based on facts given in the passage or the summary, right? So with that, we have come to the end of this section on how to make inference, and from the list of inferences you have, how to actually draw a conclusion in the most objective manner. So I'll just quickly end with the section 3 as well, and then we can just end the section, end the workshop. I hope Poobi is adding the feedback link as well for those who want to share their feedback. We would love to get your feedback. And also good news is that like every workshop that we have been doing, we want to share a checklist with you even for this workshop so that you can take it back to your classroom, print it out, use it with you. You can even share this with your students, right? Which they can use for their board exams. So here's the link. It's on the screen. I'd request Upasna Purvi to also post it in the chat box. I think that's done. So here, this checklist has 3 main boxes. So it talks about the checklist to summarize main idea. It also has a checklist to make inferences, draw conclusion, and it also clearly mentions for you or for your students to talk up to this, decide how to decide whether an inference is plausible or not, and how using a plausible list of inferences, then it becomes easy for students to objectively decide what therefore the conclusion is and what therefore is not a conclusion. So I hope all of you use this use this PDF, download it and print it and use it in your classrooms as well. It's a checklist, so students can print it out. You can print it out, share it with them. They just literally have to tick to see if they have been doing this step-by-step process to be able to summarize, make inference, draw conclusions, and to check if an inference they have made is plausible or not. And of course, like always, we do have additional resources on our platform m.centa.org. So you just need to go to m.centa.org, scroll down to the learning resources section, click sign. You would have already signed in, so you should directly be able to access. We have many more such resources there. Even resources on the stages of reading levels, etc., are there, so you can easily find them there. And yeah, on that note, we would like to end. I'll leave it on this screen so that all of you can quickly do this as well. And we hope you found the workshop useful and relevant, and we'll take back a lot of these strategies back to your classroom and use it across subjects, right? Reading comprehension is important across subjects. And yeah, have a great evening, everyone. And we hope we see you next week again for a new workshop. Good evening and goodbye. We hope all of you have downloaded the resource and actually kept it with you. Would like to see in the chat box how many of you were able to download and how useful do you think it will be for you. Thank you for all the feedback you've been sharing on the chat box. Very happy to see that you find these sessions useful. That's the whole point of why we've been doing it. So great to see all of you liking the sessions. We hope the end goal is to use these in your classrooms, which is why in every session of ours, we try to share a takeaway with all of you so that you can print it and directly use it in your classrooms. And we are also taking some questions on the chat box, but please feel free to leave the session. Bye, everyone.
Bye, everyone.